on various channels. First of all, this is Liz. She's the CEO of Lease Authority. I'm a fan of their work, and it's just awesome, first of all, to have you. And Lease Authority is a security auditing company, but they do much more than that. But we can dig into all that later. And as a side note, for those that don't know, we're HaCKBee. We're a bunch of developers that are just building cool stuff on things that are in line with Bitcoin's vision. We have projects in the Mouser ecosystem, in the Nervos ecosystem, and other places around decentralized file storage. Okay, so let's start. Liz, I just wanted to understand how you got into this space. I know we kind of dug into this a little bit, but if there was like a quick summary for people, like, yeah, there was like a long journey. Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were recording earlier or not, but so how I got into this space, I was working at the Open Technology Fund before I started with Lease Authority, and basically I met the Lease Authority team through my work at Open Technology Fund. So Lease Authority existed since 2011. It was originally founded by Zuko, and Zuko, who's from the Zcash space. Zcash spun out of Lease Authority around 2015, and I took over in 2016 as CEO so that Zuko and some others could focus on that.
And how did, like, was it weird transitioning from like a government sort of entity to I guess a startup in some ways?
Yeah, I mean, so the Open Technology Fund received money back then from, I believe they have other sources in addition to Congress at this point in time. But when I was there, I was the third person on that team hired. The program was new. It was a program within another nonprofit because it was like so startup-y. I was the third hired, yeah. So the program was new. I think OTF only had started about a year before I joined, and OTF, the Open Technology Fund, OTF now is an independent nonprofit. It's much bigger. I believe they have multiple funding sources at this point in time. But yeah, back then, we had funding that was designated through Congress, and it came through a government agency, but we were part of an independent nonprofit. And like I said, it was like the third person. So although it was like money coming from the government that we were using, we were very much more like a tech startup kind of. I mean, we weren't business, but yeah, it was definitely more low key and a different kind of workplace. So it wasn't like, I have worked for the federal government and like local government before in past, in my past job history, and yeah, it was different.
Wow. And I think just as a note for everyone, you said that this fund also helped support, what was it called again?
Red phone and text security? Yeah, Signal. Before Signal was Signal, it was two separate apps, Red Phone and Text Secure, and then it was rebranded. Those two apps were combined and rebranded as Signal. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of history for everyone, and we should all dig into this, but it's awesome. So you got to interact with the Signal team fairly early. Okay, wow.
Yeah, the Open Technology Fund, I believe it's still relatively close now as it was back then, but we were supposed to use the funding to help open source projects that advanced internet freedom. So that's Signal.
Okay, so as people are joining, if for all of you that know, we're going to be recording this, and you guys probably missed some cool stuff about what Liz was doing, but we'll go back to this in a little bit. And a little bit about how you got this. Is there something that made you go down this path of like going to like, you know, like internet freedom, privacy. It's not like the normal like corporate job that people go to, you know, it's not the thing they're fighting for. And I was just wondering, what is it that you think drives you to do this?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'll try to summarize it, but throughout my career, I mean, I've been in tech my whole career, and you know, early on, I don't think I realized it as much, but over the years, you start to realize that technology is not exactly neutral, and that it really can enable and empower certain things, and really have an impact on the world, you know, whether it be just like, you know, changing people's processes through digitization within an organization, or, you know, enabling people to be banked when they're unbanked and stuff, like to have actual access to, you know, financial services, financial inclusion. So, I mean, you start to realize that technology has some sort of impact on the world. And so I realized that if I'm going to be in tech, I might as well be contributing to things that I believe in and I want to help. That got me into the open source space in Web2. That got me into all kinds of interesting digitization efforts, including information access. And so I was very much in the space of how do we take, you know, important information and make it more readily available to people. And so I did a lot on that side, which is transparency essentially. And transparency is very much related to privacy, that the world needs both of these quite balanced in order to have like good balance of like power dynamics in our societies. And so, yeah, that led me to recognize that privacy matters, and privacy is very much enabled by security. So, you know, you can't have private communications unless the communication tools are secure. You can't have, you know, privacy without, basically security. So that's how I ended up here.
Got it. I was just wondering if there was like somebody stole your thing when you were like, yo, and you're like, oh, I gotta, like, there's this like thing inside that's like driving, but yeah, it's, that's interesting. It was like a very,
I think all of us have those moments through our lives where there's something that like, there's like small turning points, but they're usually not that exciting. And, you know, you like 10, 20, 25 years pass and you look back and you're like, how did I end up here? And it was a lot of those little moments, you know, not exactly one.
Understood. Okay. So I wanted to go into a little bit of about lease authority.
Yeah.
I mean, I looked on the website, you know, you guys got auditing services, you guys have like products, like, and we were going a little bit like, what is lease authority? Like, what do you guys do? Like, who are you? You know, like
the question of identity. Yeah.
Who are you?
Yeah.
Who am I?
That is something that as a, you know, I've been running the company now for 7 years. And that's something that like we revisit periodically, is like, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? You know, and I think those are good questions to periodically revisit. I would say that, you know, for us, it really comes, we have a strong mission, and it comes back down to, we care to help this technology be advanced in the world, to advance like the human right of privacy. Like I said, that, you know, is often done through enabling security. So we want to help projects be more secure. We want to build more secure tools ourselves too. And towards that end, of course, not everything has to be privacy oriented, but like I said, security is pretty fundamental to a lot of things. And so if our tools are reliably secure, then, you know, we can do a lot more with that technology and have that impact on the world. So, you know, we're a group of people that care about that stuff. And then we try to adapt to the changing circumstances in the world too with these tools, but also see the long game, that like, we just got to keep working on this stuff and making sure that it's available to people.
And how many people are in lease authority like right now
I think about 27, so a little under 30.
And what is the makeup of that? Is it just engineers? Is it like poets? Like how does it work? Sometimes we do talk about our like side hobbies and stuff, and there is quite a variety. I mean, it's researchers and engineers mostly, and of course we have operations staff to support.
everything and like strategic staff and stuff like that. But yeah, engineers and researchers. Yeah.
Got it. And I think there was a question in the chat from someone that says, is Tahoe LAF still developed at Lease Authority?
Yeah, so Tahoe LAFS, or Tahoe LAFS, sometimes we call it, and that stands for Lease Authority File Store. And the relation of leased authority is related to the principle of leased authority. So yeah, that tool, it actually started before leased authority existed. So it's an open source project that is independent of leased authority. But yeah, leased authority has greatly contributed to it over the years. And we have team members that have actively developed on it in the past years. And we have a product based on it called Private Storage. And that's basically a hosted managed version of Tahoe LAFS. Oh, and I should say that Tahoe LAFS, I should tell you all what it is. It's a distributed secure storage.
Okay, so is it kind of like an encrypted version of IPFS? Like what would be a way to think about it? Okay.
Yeah, it has slightly different properties than IPFS, but yeah, it's got the security layer, that like the security integrated into it. So that's how it's different from IPFS. And then also IPFS is one large network. You participate in the IPFS network or you don't. Tahoe LAFS has not quite the exact same properties. You can set up like smaller networks, and it can be used as P2P or as client server models.
Interesting. Yeah. And this is an entirely separate product now called Private Storage, which is managed by Lease Authority.
Yeah. So Tahoe LAFS is the open source project. So the code is open out there. Anybody else can use it for other purposes, do what they want. Private Storage is basically a hosted managed version of it.
Okay. And speaking of that, I'm curious what you think would be like, how would you get people to use some service like this? Because everybody's so used to like S3 or Dropbox or whatever. They're like, well, I don't need, do you think it's just convincing people that privacy matters, or is it like a functional thing? Like what do you think it is?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And this is my answer to this has changed over the years. As people change, we all as humans in societies, we advance our thinking through things. I think privacy didn't matter as much before a while. Like people were kind of, I don't want to say oblivious to it, but yeah, it's just like it wasn't at the forefront of our thinking with our technology. But over the years, we've come to recognize that the lack of privacy that we have in certain Web 2 systems, and just certain systems in general, that lack of privacy is a problem. This is why we got regulations now, like GDPR and stuff. Those didn't exist because people didn't think there was a problem. Then you find a problem, you start to address it. The Snowden leaks, things have changed over the years, where people are starting to appreciate that privacy does matter more. Are they willing to pay for it yet? Probably not really. And that's the other hard part is people recognize privacy, as humans, we recognize some things matter, but are we willing to change our habits or do things differently as a result? Similar to climate change, we all know it's a huge problem. What are we doing about it as people? So I think that it's just human nature that we shift our thoughts over time, but we also have lots of different priorities during our day-to-day life. And so how that plays out with people paying for a tool, not as many people pay for it as I would like from a business perspective, but I mean, I totally understand from the human perspective. And so, I think for privacy enhancing technologies like private storage, and, it's on us to figure out how to make it more convenient, more easy to use, more affordable for people, so that it can be used more.
That's, I think what you're saying is the benchmark of somebody paying for it we're still a little bit off from that.
Seems like it, yeah.
And do you think that that's just something that do you think that will just grow over time, or is that something which needs to be it's something that needs to be pushed, like saying, hey, hence regulation, right? People are not going to do this voluntarily. You have to kind of force them to do it. Or do you think it's something like, let's say with climate change, with electric cars, where there's just these new products that's just way more awesome, and people will go to it? Like, how do you,
different people have different thoughts on this that are all valid, and I'm one of the people that thinks all these things are necessary, that there's not one answer to the problem, that, it's not just like regulation isn't the only answer, or cooler tools or different business models. These aren't the only answers. I think we need to do all of these things together. But yeah, that's kind of a really vague general answer to that question. I think there's a lot more nuances and different tools and different use cases where people need privacy, where, there's certain cases, again, with the power dynamics where, maybe you can't put it on the user. It has to be on the organization, that responsibility to make it more accessible or easier to use. But then in other cases, some of our habits have to just change.
So maybe on that, we can segue a little bit to things around, I guess, zero knowledge, maybe not so much from a specific technical perspective, but I think there's often like confusion around like zero knowledge for privacy, and then zero knowledge is in like some way of like shortening stuff.
Scalability.
Scalability. And I'm curious, why do you think, for instance, things like Zcash hasn't like taken off more? Do you feel that it's just, I mean, I'm a holder, I've been holding Zcash forever, I'm like, but maybe there's something that's just like missing, or is it just technically so slow? Like, what is it?
The specific case of Zcash, it's probably, again, a few factors that go into it, and also just new technology just sometimes takes time to get adopted. It always takes time to be adopted, and people have studied like over the years, like, how does innovation get disseminated through societies? How does it get adopted? And then, what's the tipping point for these things? And the answer is usually it's some element of timing, right, along with like just having the right thing at the right time kind of thing. And I think that, technically speaking, Zcash and what the team has done over the years is just amazing. So right, they've got that right. And maybe it's an element of timing, I don't know, right, and people understanding and being ready for it.
Okay, got it.
But you should talk to the Zcashers. They would give you a much better answer.
Yes. It was just, after you mentioned it, it was just on my head since the beginning. So that's the last question on Zcash. And as a note, for anybody that has any questions, feel free to just like type it in the chat, or just speak up, and happy to just answer these. I know Lease Authority has audited some of the like top protocols. Like if you're just looking at logos, it's like you go to your website and it's like a list of who's who, right? Like that's it. Like but I'm curious, when you do when you do these audits, it seems like each project is so different. Like, for instance, you audited Nervos, which is a very different project than, let's say, Mina, or like, how do you build up the expertise to do these audits? Like, what happens? Like, how does it work? Again, like with technology, there's some things that, and like security especially, there's some things that are pretty fundamental, and how things need to, like these principles that operate around security, and how you have to look for different things within systems that can be applied to any system. You just maybe the day-to-day of like doing that audit is a little bit different, but the principles of what's necessary for security still kind of remain the same. Throughout those, but logistically, like just, as
humans, there's lots of us who have had careers that like we've just done a lot, like windy paths through our careers and have a lot of different skill sets, and having a team full of people with really interesting backgrounds and lots of different experiences really just allows us to, you know, find that different combination of the right teams to look at the things. And then also it's a mindset too for the team members that, you know, what's important, not necessarily, I mean, skills, of course, like understanding security principles and those kinds of like skills are necessary, but you also need this adversarial kind of thinking going into this. And again, that's something that can be applied to any technology. And it's more about the ability to think from that perspective sometimes than necessarily knowing exactly how, you know, C works versus JavaScript. You need to know some of those differences to be able to like see the implementation of some of these principles and the issues there. But again, people with a variety of backgrounds helps, and then this kind of overall thinking. So
security auditors need to have trust issues, and those are the best. It's like when you're filling out the application, you're like,
healthy paranoia. I mean, like healthy trust for our technology. Yeah, I mean, but yeah, I mean, again, a lot of this technology is doing like, it's a huge impact on our life, and you know, whether it's moving money or carrying really sensitive information about us, like,
right,
it's important that it's secure. And yeah, I mean, like security is risk management, so I think there's a healthy amount of paranoia that's needed, yeah, and mistrust. But yeah,
I'm wondering, do you think audits are particularly like common in Web3 relative to other, like, let's say a Web2 industry? Like, I feel like before, when I was just, I don't know about our company. Like, I worked at Zillow for a bit. I'm not sure we ever got audited. Why is that the case? Or is that the case?
Yeah, I have reflected on this. This is interesting to see. I think, you know, there's an ethos and there's a necessity that's different than, say, Web 2. Web 2 with very centralized systems and like, you know, closed source code. Then, you know, you can just kind of say, like, just trust us. Like, we're this big entity and we're taking care of the code. Just trust us. We all know how that's working out. You know, in some cases it's okay, you know, but in a lot of cases it's really not worked for us. And we have had all kinds of like data leaks and stuff like that. And so like, but the architecture of the technology in Web3 is this, like, you know, the ethos of like, let's, you know, focus on decentralization and empowering the end user, and, you know, incorporate things like security and privacy at a different, especially privacy at a different level. But also that control, you know, at a different level for people. That just necessitates a different kind of trust model, which is what we want, right? And so instead of being able to just trust the centralized entity, you have to now trust the technology itself, because the technology is what's enabling your ability here. And so therefore, how do we trust it? We have audits, we publish those audits, and also we publish the code, you know? So the publishing of the code, I think, you know, having open source code be quite, you know, it's not universal, but it's an important piece to the Web3 ecosystem. Then that encourages this publishing of the reports too. So I think the audits happen in the Web2 space. They do happen because we know that there's vulnerabilities and we know that there's problems. We know that security matters, but it's just again, the threat model and the ethos is just a bit different. So a lot of those reports don't get published, and they're sometimes internal. But like you said, there's also plenty of companies that just don't do it. So I mean, it's just different.
Were there ever, okay, for instance, would you ever reject a company based on some sort of like philosophical value? Let's say if an FTX came to you, and I don't know, I'm not speaking like, I'm not trying to, you know, but like if they came to you and you saw something in their code that you're like, I don't know, like would you say like, I would not audit them, or like I would, yeah, like does that happen? Like, do you have to make a...
Yeah, it has happened very occasionally over the years. But I mean, really it comes down to, we want to help, right? And so I think you have to be careful with your level of judgment. But there are certain lines that shouldn't be crossed. you know?
Right.
So like, we're not going to help a scam. Like, clear scam. But if there's some people like who are trying to do better, but they don't maybe understand all of the stuff yet and they need help, like then they need just help. Like it's like there's some element of like intent there. Like if you're looking to scam people, no, we're not going to help you. We're not going to help you with that end goal. But if you're looking to help like financial inclusion and you just don't, you know, maybe you just don't know as much about security, or there's some element that you don't understand as much, like about centralization of certain parts of your system, no problem. That's what we're here for. And the fact that there's a business involved with our work, I think is key to that too, because again, if you're a scam, you don't really want to hire and pay somebody to like help you know how much you're scamming. You know, it's not really like, I don't know, there's not really a good incentive there. But
Okay.
if you legitimately want to improve the security of your project, then you will, you know, possibly make it a priority to engage with a security auditing firm to help you do that. And so, you know, there's a somewhat, you know, there's arguably like so there's a good incentive
Yes.
to have business be around this. Arguably, there's some stuff that happens in Web3 that isn't like good business model stuff. And so there should be some, you know, subsidized audits in certain areas and stuff, but that's a different conversation. Yeah. But yeah, so if somebody came to us that had, yeah.
So one thing that I've seen in this space is that as security audits become more prevalent, it's become a like thing that a company does as like a logo that they put on their website.
Yes.
Now we've been audited and you can trust us now. And there's like companies that do this. I don't think Lease Authority is one of them for sure. But how has auditing changed over the years? Like where is the industry going? Like, yeah, how do you see it? And like the relationship between like apps and auditing companies, yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see it change. I mean, we did one of the first audits in like the Ethereum space, I think, if not the first Ethereum audit back in 2015.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, in the 2000, and then, you know, there was more wave of stuff like with ICOs and stuff, 2017. Back in that kind of time period, like we were really explaining things differently about like, yeah, security matters and this is why you should get an audit. But like you said, that fast forward to now, like audits are now seen as like sometimes just for marketing, where, you know, yeah, we got an audit, so we're all good. But of course it's not that simple, but you know, it's the good and the bad. More people recognize that the security audits matter. So of course you're going to have different interpretations of like what needs to be done as part of an audit. I think as a community and as an industry, I mean, we just have to continue to ask ourselves, like, how do we ensure the best outcome for everybody? And, you know, how do we advance all of our security knowledge? How do we make sure that these values that like, we don't want to do security theater, we want the real results,
right,
from the real improvement, but also still at the same time have some tolerance for, you know, mistakes and experimentation, and because again, it's new technology and we have to be pushing forward with it, which means we're going to sometimes fail. And we have to get up and keep on going. So yeah, it's, as an industry, it's definitely changed over the years. And I think the next step for us as an industry is that to start to look at like, you know, where can we help to, you know, educate the users about like security audits, that like, yeah, okay, great. You're looking for the fact that it's been audited,
right.
But let's dig that a little bit deeper now.
Because it's hard for the everyday user. Like very few people is gonna read the audit report, right? It's like it's probably just as complicated as the code, and like some intense analysis and right.
Yeah.
Would it be to like simplify that report in some ways? Like what, or would it be to like what would that look like?
Yeah, I think that's like where we need to and where we are moving is that next level of, okay, now we've got, you know, people getting audits, we've got the audit reports out there, but is there some other way that people can, you know, understand these differently? Can we help present this information to users to help understand the nuances? Yeah, and I hope that we'll see more experimentation in this area too. And I think we are already, little steps.
Right. There's been some, like, ideas I think that I saw some people implementing, which is around things like insurance. So
Yeah.
like if you got audited, you have insurance. Like, do you think those things work? Like, should an auditing company become an insurance company in some ways? Like, like that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I've thought about this a little bit too. It's and talked to some people. I'm not, I don't have much in the expertise around insurance, but there is an element of underwriting to insurance in the current insurance industry, and so there is about like how do we translate that to our industry? And yeah, I think auditing companies can play a part in that. How tightly we should be, like how closely should we be working with the insurance companies? I don't know, but again, experimentation to see, and try some different relationships with that, just to make sure the incentives are correct and that there's not like conflict of interest in certain cases is I think all we have to be careful for. But yeah, insurance is definitely one part. I think, there's other things that like we can do, and again we can learn from other industries and how we handle stuff with other types of products in our lives too.
Right. Oh, let's go. Just got heated. Yeah. Does that make sense? So should an auditing firm take some responsibility if the audited project is exploited later? And between a good auditing firm from a bad one. It's like do that, I guess. Those
are two different questions. Yeah. I mean, for the first one, I'm curious, like when people ask about responsibility, what does that mean to them? Like, it's one thing to say like, yeah, we audited, we're forced to take some responsibility if the report is published. But well, I shouldn't say we're forced. It's better to say, yeah, like we missed something. Take responsibility in that way. But do you mean like financial responsibility? Maybe that's what they mean.
I think that's maybe what they're saying, right? Like if a project got hacked after it was audited, is there some financial maybe responsibility that the auditing firm should take?
Yeah, possibly, but it just has to be architected in a way that makes sense, because if you're bankrupting auditing companies every time they make a mistake, then that's also not good for the industry. We need to have sustainable businesses and solid business models. So I would say that the key around this is just figuring out like what the business model is. And this is, I think, insurance like kind of model where, but auditing firms also should have their own insurance. But like, this is where, insurance, the concept or mutuals is like putting the money into one pool together. Everybody pays a small fee. And then if you have a problem, then you get to pull out of it. And so, yeah, those experiments are one way to help with that. We just have to make sure that the numbers work.
Yes, because we know that there are auditing companies whose projects have like, it's like, there's like a list and the project that they've audited has been like hacked or something. Like it's kind of something crazy. Not every, but anyway. And then maybe the second question, like what do you think makes a good security auditing company versus a bad one, I guess? What do you think separates least authority from most authority? From max authority?
Well, I think that there has to be a certain level of so we're in the business of risk management, like security is risk management. We're in this business that's just hard. We're going to occasionally fail. Like it's inevitable because you can't 100% guarantee a risk won't, like something won't happen. It's all about managing like the likeliness and the impact of risks and stuff. And, you could have somebody audit something for 2 years straight and like some other human comes along and figures out how to get in. So with auditing, there's a point, like there's a good amount that like we can find a lot. And then there's a point of diminishing returns again, because it's about risks. And so, there has to be some tolerance for mistakes and failure in our space. But yeah, we still have to hold people accountable for just, are you doing this work because you want to offer quality, or are you doing this to just make money? You can make money and do quality work together. And, we all know this from all kinds of businesses. So just continue to make sure that we, work towards that.
Got it. So there's a question, and it's like, if an auditor finds a bug and deliberately held it from being exposed, it's like 0 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, is there anything that prevents you from not saying anything?
There's definitely like an ethical issue there. I mean, whether or not there's a legal issue, that's a lawyer question. I think it would depend on the jurisdiction, and also it would depend on how the jurisdiction handles like hacks, and knowledge of that stuff. And it would also probably depend on the contract, like the type of agreement and how those agreements are handled. Again, you need to have some tolerance that that they don't get punished if they like if it was like an innocent oversight. But if it's like an intentional withholding of information, then that's bad. This is a good lawyer question though, about how it's handled.
Yes, I think that's an interesting question, because it's not saying like, oh, it's like alpha. I found something, I'm gonna like hack it. It's saying like, I'm not gonna say anything. Right? Yeah,
my understanding of this stuff in general is that like this isn't necessarily a new problem. Like this could happen with like home inspectors or some. I don't know. It's a special problem in our space because of how things can be exploited and how much money is involved in some of these systems. But I think that there's like often considered like a standard of professionalism that's expected like from the legal perspective that. And then there's probably something more there that could be done, but that's bad. And I hope that like we would talk about that openly, like as an industry, so that, because that's not cool. But there have been some scenarios too. I have seen some reports where there's some question of this or conflict of interest questions and stuff. That's a tough one though.
So as a security auditing company, you will be never allowed to invest in companies.
Oh, that's interesting. No, I think we can. There's no rule against that. I think it's the the interest that I see more on like a logistical point would be like, if you were a developer of a tool, you shouldn't be auditing it.
Oh.
Like that one's, because I mean, first off, you're probably not the best auditor because you wrote it. It's good to get fresh eyes, like all, external independent eyes on it, people reviewing it. Another one being like in this, like, I've seen some, like if you were somehow related to the project or audited the project and then later on go do a bug bounty for this, you found a problem, don't report it, and then go do a bug bounty or exploit it. I mean, if you're exploiting it, then you're doing something wrong in that stage. But like the bug bounty, it's free to do. I mean, open to participate in those, but there's definitely, I think, an ethical and maybe a conflict of interest there. And that's where I would say, like, maybe that's where the terms of participation for some of these types of things, and then also the response just to hackers. But I hope that answers it.
Got it. One question, and then we're going to kind of the quick fire and kind of just some of this discussion is, having audited so many different ecosystems, like you've done stuff in, I guess, Ethereum, like EOS, I guess, and like other places. Like, do you think there is a particular type? So it's split in two parts. Do you have a bias towards a particular type of architecture for the blockchain ecosystem? Like, do you think that one is better than the other? Okay. Yes. And then the second is, do you think there is a difference in how applications are built, the type of people working on them? Like, what do you see across these ecosystems? And
that's a great question, and I think this is like the $1 billion question too. If I could tell you like which blockchain's the best, then
there's only one right answer. No.
Well, I mean, I think what I've seen happen is that people are developing, like, so blockchain technology, it's been around. People make changes to this kind of fundamental idea for different purposes. So one project might say, we want to help, the speed of processing of transactions. So we're going to make this technical change to it. Another one might say we value privacy. So we're going to make a technical change to implement more privacy and stuff. And that's basically what's been happening, over the years, is that like, okay, we're going to turn this dial and see what that is. And there's just a lot of that goes. So I don't think that there is like one that's better. It depends on what your goal is. Obviously there are some chains that like can do certain things,
right,
maybe more effectively or efficiently at this point in time. And I just say at this point in time because they're still in development and there's still more that can be done. So, and I think the important part is to just that they all learn from each other, and that, again, it depends on your philosophy. That I think that like the way that technology works in our world tends to be that we have a limited number of choices that tend to be popular,
right,
operating systems, browsers, etc. That's what we like gravitate towards. And so I suspect that this would follow the same path, that there's and that seems to be what's happening to a degree right now. But it's moving. Yeah, it's technology. You can look over at your competitor and say, oh, cool, they figured out some scalability stuff. I'll do that too. And people should. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I'll give you a pass on that answer. It's
but okay, but obviously, like, yeah, there are some that have better technical quality and better security properties than others, of course. Yeah.
Right. And would you say those are? What letter do those chains start with? Like, no, I'm totally just curious. Like, I'm just honest opinion from like, do you think there is some chains that just have better security, like inherently, because of the way they're architected or something? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, some of them are more mature, and so they've had time to develop in different directions. But security isn't like one layer; it's multiple layers. So one chain might have a lot more nodes that are independent from each other. And then others might be able to, like transact in a different way, like the way the block is written. And so that can avoid certain types of issues. So yeah, I mean, like there's all kinds of different levels of it. And I don't think anyone at this point has kind of really gotten all of those points covered. But like I said, we're working towards it as everybody just advances in different ways. And then share that. But and it's priorities too. So what's your priority for the system? What's the user's priority for how they're like interacting with it?
Right. Okay, understood. And then curious, we'll just switch up and then we can also just go into questions. But as a CEO of a remote company with like dozens of people, how do you survive on a day-to-day basis? Like what have you learned just doing all of this? Like, yeah.
Oh, flexibility. Yeah, I mean, like we're around the world and we're all different humans with all kinds of like different lives. So we have to be flexible with each other, but we have to be really accountable with each other too. So, and just make sure we know what our priorities are for work and, deliver. So yeah, if you want to work at 2 a.m., that's fine. If you want to work at 3 p.m., that's fine, but just get it done. And get it done in a way that you're accountable to your, that you're caring for your coworkers and, we're all working together as a team, but have space to be individuals. So yeah, it's just making sure that the priorities are clear with the team, that we have some level of flexibility and forgiveness for being like, for our personal lives and the things that, impact us. But yeah, that we all are here for a reason. And that has to drive you. And if it's not, then you belong somewhere else in a nice way.
And do you think there's a particular thing that you've implemented that you feel are great? Okay. Well, let's go. One more question. We'll say, are there any layer 2 projects on, I guess, for Bitcoin layer 2? On lease authorities audited list, and what's your definition
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm not a dictionary. Yeah, I mean, what are these layers? Yeah, I mean, layers on top of or related to. Yeah, I mean, if it's the Bitcoin question, yeah, we've worked with stacks. I don't know if you want to call that like an L2. I guess some people do.
Right.
Yeah.
But
So
no. Oh, go ahead, please.
Were you going to ask about other blockchains?
Oh no, I'm just saying, like, how would you define? What do you think makes a layer 2 on Bitcoin?
This is like, what that makes a layer 2 on Bitcoin. I think generally that the layer 2 definition is just that there's operations happening independent of the underlying blockchain, but it's interacting with the underlying blockchain at some point in time, like as some part. Otherwise, it would be an independent chain, right? If it's never touching to that other chain, but that could also be like it could be defined in different ways. Oh gosh, you guys are quizzing me on this now.
Yeah, let's go. I think it's like
they said, I mean, L2s on any blockchain. Yeah, so yeah, we've definitely worked with L2s on Ethereum. I don't know if in the Cosmos we've done stuff in Cosmos too. I don't know if those are considered L2s though. I mostly hear the L2 label used for Bitcoin and Ethereum so far. But I'm sure there's other blockchains. We've done so much. We have over 100 audits published on our website. So
right.
Yeah.
And I think you would say that stacks is kind of a layer 2, I guess. I mean, you kind of mentioned it earlier, like sort of.
Yeah. I mean, the layer 2 term I hear just mostly with Ethereum.
Right.
Like the Bitcoin space, like there's some things that are kind of similar, but like they're different. So sometimes there's different terminology, like has happened with NFTs and ordinals. Like,
right.
It makes sense to call them something slightly different.
Maybe there should be a better name for it. Yeah.
That layer 2s?
Yeah, for Bitcoin, I guess, or for other chains, but yeah.
Yeah.
I'm thinking out loud.
Yeah. No, I am too. I mean, I think I'm sure that we could Google some like basic definitions of layer 2s, but again, this technology is changing and how we interact, and we're experimenting. So we can change that definition tomorrow. And now, do we call it an L? Like, it's slightly different. Do we still call it an L2, or do we make up a new name for it? I don't know. But from my perspective at this point, people usually use that term if it's doing some operations independently of an underlying blockchain, in the sense that it might even have its own blockchain, but it's relaying some information and to another more fundamental blockchain or more established.
Right. Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Have to debate that one.
Well, if anybody has any questions, please just shout it out. But I'm gonna. Jim, what?
Is it auditing is a one-time?
Yeah.
Is there some kind of incremental, continuous auditing practice?
Yes. Yeah, this is a great question too. So asking about like the kind of project approach, definitive end, like here's the definitive scope and end of an audit versus like continuous auditing. So with there's different approaches to this, and there's kind of pros and cons to it too. With most audits to this point have been framed as projects where there's a definitive scope and there's a definitive end. And yes, for the most part, we do want to look at fixed code. Like we want to look at like a commit from a point in time. There can be some changes as we audit, but that also tends to if the changes become too much, then it becomes inefficient because we need to look at the entire thing. That being said, that once we've looked at an entire code base, it then depends on like what is the software development lifecycle, what are the features that are moving forward from that point in time. If you're and also how that code base has been architected. So some people develop if you're making fundamental changes to the design, yes, you want a complete re-audit. If you're just layering on some features in a more modular fashion, then we can do component type approach, component follow-up audits, or if there's like a clear diff of changes that only touch part of the code base, then there can be like an audit of the diff. And so there's some practices like that we can like work with how the software development plans are, like how that roadmap is and evolving. But yeah, I mean, especially like things like smart contract space, like when smart contracts are changed, it can have like a really fundamental, it's not a lot of code, but it's a fundamental change, maybe needs to be re-audited, or again, people could look at the diff. Yeah, so what we're seeing happen over the years though, is that, you know, in the beginning, people were like, I'm making a thing. And now their things are started like, and so then it was like, okay, we'll do a project to audit it. Makes sense. But now these things are like, you know, maturing into real products. And, you know, there's like now dApps are being built on blockchains, and, you know, there's whole ecosystems developing and stuff like that. And so of course the model has to shift too. But typically it's, typically it's a one big project. It's a project, and then maybe smaller projects that follow. Yeah.
Got it.
I think the only thing I can add to that is that there's efficiency of working with the same team in those follow-up audits, because they've already seen the fundamental, then they've done the fundamental review. But then there's also benefit to working with new teams. It's less efficient, but it's also better for security sometimes to get a whole different team. So you see sometimes projects will get audits by 3 different auditors, and that can be a good thing.
Got it.
So that's more of a business decision about like your security risk like your threat model of like, do we need fresh like independent reviews of this versus the efficiency and cost savings perhaps that comes with working with the same team longer.
Got it. There's a last question which says, do you have concerns with Bitcoin security if its block reward reduces even more than it is now? Like there's less reward.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there should be, again, it's a risk, right? And I think that risks you have to mitigate if you can't remediate them. Like, let's look at how we can mitigate that. So I think it would be good for generally when you're handling any security risks, you don't want to say, it's not a problem, let's not analyze it. We should analyze like, okay, like if that does, you know, introduce some level of risk, like how can we quantify that risk and what's the impact of that risk? So yeah, I think that would be important to dig into.
Got it. Economic and tokenomic risks, essentially. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. To end then, I'm gonna ask, is there something that you wish there is more of or less of in our ecosystem? And is there a project or thing that you wish we knew about that maybe that you're excited about? So 2 things.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I think we just need to continue to have conversations about like the management of security and how we want to handle that as an industry. We're still in these like days where we're off in our little world, like working on this stuff, and like the rest of the world is only just starting to look at what we're doing. And so we have this opportunity to really decide for ourselves as an industry how we want to handle some stuff before others try to come in and tell us how to do it. Or, you know, like change that anyway. But I also think ethically it's good for us to care about security as an industry, and, you know, just have more conversations about this, like what should we be doing with those audit reports, and like how do we, you know, define quality audit versus not. Some of us just kind of know, but how can we help those who don't know? How can we help more people who don't have the experience that we have just get into the space and understand how to navigate it and things like that? Because that wave is coming at some point in time. You know, like I'm sure all of you have the experience where, like, you know, your friend is like, hey, I think I'm ready to own some Bitcoin. Or I want to start, you know, I want to learn more about this. Like they ignored it for years. Now they were asking questions. How do we help them? And how do we help them be secure? Because it's not in any of our interest if everything blows up in people's faces just because they're not experienced. Yeah, what was the rest of your question? I think
the other one was just, are there some things that you think we should know about? Like project, tools, or ideas?
There's so much happening these days, it's hard to keep track of. I think that I encourage people, if you don't know about zero knowledge, to look into it more also, but don't ignore things like fully homomorphic encryption and of course multi-party computation you're probably familiar with too. But these are tools that we can use and we're just scratching the surface as to how we can use some of these cryptographic tools. And I encourage people to dig into that kind of area some more. And then I also suggest history, like you and I were talking about before this started, that there's a lot of interesting history of where some of this technology came from. People have, experimented in certain ways in the past and we can learn from them. So.
Got it. And if there are follow-up questions, I can email those to Liz or something, but I think it's been long enough and got a lot of work, but thank you everybody for coming here. Thank you, Liz, and Lisa Thari's on Twitter, you're on Twitter, you're on the internet, and and we'll be putting the videos out for this, and would love to be able to do more stuff in the future, host things, and you're amazing.
It was so great to chat with you. Thanks so much for inviting me, and thanks everyone for joining and asking your questions. It's fun.
Yeah, I just saw 2 more pop up, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, then maybe we'll have to do another session sometime.